Now that right-wing conspiracy theorist Alex Jones has been ordered to pay the staggering sum of nearly $1 billion in damages to families of those killed in the Sandy Hook school shooting, the question remains of how much of that money those families will actually see.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please listen to your verdict as it has been accepted and recorded.
A Connecticut jury slapped Jones and the parent company of his InfoWars website with the penalty this week after he was found guilty of spreading the lie that the 2012 massacre was staged. Jones says he will appeal the amount and use the recent bankruptcy of his company to avoid paying. But Reuters correspondent Jack Queen, who's been covering the case, says bankruptcy protection will only go so far.
The plaintiffs will likely be able to continue to pursue these judgments after the bankruptcy because they involved intentional infliction of harm, and bankruptcy courts pretty routinely rule that those are not to be just discharged in bankruptcy alone. And so that would allow the parents to go after Jones's wages, put liens on his properties, things like that, even after the bankruptcy is concluded.
Jones could also ask a judge or appeals court to reduce the verdict on the grounds that it is excessive. Another argument that Queen says will fall flat given Jones's behavior of repeatedly violating court orders, claiming the trial was a sham, and erupting into a tirade against liberals during his testimony.
So the sum total of that would make it really, really hard for him to now go to a court and say, okay, well, let's be reasonable here, because objectively he has not been reasonable at all throughout these entire proceedings. And according to every observer I spoke to, has been clearly treating the whole thing with contempt.
InfoWars' finances are not public, but according to trial testimony, the site brought in revenue of at least $165 million between 2016 and 2018. One economist estimated that Jones is personally worth between $135 million and $270 million. But while it's unclear whether Jones or any of his companies even have $1 billion to pay, attorneys for the families remain undaunted.
And while it's going to take a lot of work, these families are very confident that they're going to get every cent that they can, and it will be a substantial sum of money. His personal wealth and the assets of his media empire, all of it's on the table.
Beyond Meat said on Friday it would cut 200 jobs and slash its annual revenue forecast for the second time. The plant-based meat maker is facing an array of hurdles. Rising prices are pushing customers to look for cheaper alternatives, while higher costs are eating away at profits. Global packaged food makers such as Tyson Foods and Kellogg have raised prices to offset higher costs tied to ingredients, labor, and transportation. But analysts told Reuters that Beyond Meat does not have the room for that, as it is still trying to win customers to its plant-based protein. The job cuts will include some in the executive suite. Beyond Meat said it would eliminate the North America president post. This comes after it parted ways with its former chief operating officer, Doug Ramsey, who was suspended in September after media reports about him biting a man's nose during an altercation in a parking garage in Arkansas. The announced layoffs are expected to save Beyond Meat about $39 million over the next 12 months.
Scottish actor Robbie Coltrane, best known for playing Hagrid in the Harry Potter films, has died. He was 72. His career spanned more than 4 decades, including roles in the James Bond films and starring in the 1990s British TV series Cracker as criminal psychologist Dr. Edward Fitzgerald. Born Anthony Robert Macmillan in Rutherglen, South Lanarkshire, the actor changed his name as an homage to celebrated jazz musician John Coltrane. He played a string of key television roles before winning international fame, but perhaps none as big or larger than life as Hagrid.
This morning, yes. No, it's evening.
He spoke about the part in 2001 after the release of the first film.
It would have been sacrilegious. It would have been completely inappropriate to do anything other than the book. Really, yeah. Because children are very particular. They know exactly what they like, and they would notice if you did anything wrong. Joe Rollins, who wrote it, said I was the only man to play Hagrid.
J.K. Rowling led the tributes on Twitter, calling Coltrane an incredible talent, adding, quote, "I'll never know anyone remotely like Robbie again." Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon also sent her condolences, saying his role in the crime series Cracker was her favorite. Coltrane died in a Scottish hospital, according to reporting by Britain's PA media. He is survived by his sister, 2 children, and their mother.
Profits slid at the biggest American banks in the third quarter as they braced for a weaker economy. JPMorgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo showed a slide in net income after turbulent markets and higher interest rates choked off investment banking activity, and lenders set aside more rainy day funds to cover losses from borrowers who fall behind on payments. JPMorgan CEO Jamie Dimon said the bank was hoping for the best, but remained vigilant and are prepared for bad outcomes. Tactical Income founder Jeff Tomasulo says it is consumers' behavior that will decide if the bank's future would be worse.
The most interesting part that I think we should take away from this, and it's something that we have to watch, it is so critical, is the consumer. And we saw this in Citibank's earnings, right? You heard them talk about their credit cards and their products, right? Their lending products that have increased tremendously over the last quarter. And it's showing us, and we heard it out of JPMorgan, that the consumer is still spending money right now. Is that because wages are increasing, right? And they're not feeling this inflationary pressures that we've seen? But to me, I always said the last shoe to drop, and that could really put a dagger in the overall market and to a lot of these earnings.
Despite the drop in profits, shares of JPMorgan, Citi, and Wells rose Friday as the banks managed to beat lowered expectations. But not Morgan Stanley. Its stock slumped as it reported a 30% drop in profits, worse than expected.
Incredible. Welcome home, Crew 4. Great view watching Dragon splash down. Back.
And there you are getting a view of those fast boats as they approach the vehicle. And getting some waves from the crew on board.
Getting the crew back on board here in the next few minutes. The ship left around the time
And so once the crew egresses the capsule, the screen there, that is all part of our standard procedures. Looks like we're getting some claps and cheers for Bob Hines. First out of Crew Dragon Freedom.